So we'll go ahead and start with you guys here if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you want to shift your attention over here, they're going to start. We have a self-presentation to share.
Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you today, and thank you so much those who made this such an exciting event possible. Actually, we are not fermenter. No, we are not from the food business. But we are here to share you a story that we witnessed through one of our recent work. So a little bit about ourselves in a nutshell. We are both, me and my wife Armine, are both the civil society practitioners. I'm coming from Turkey. Armine is from Armenia. You know that two countries has a century-long disputes, in particularly two main pillars. One of them is 1915 genocide, another is the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. So what we have done by now is pretty much focusing on the area and the grassroots efforts and attempts for the peace building and the bridging that to divided communities. So the story we will be telling you today is something that we came across during one of our recent latest initiative, which was a culinary program aiming to fostering the rapprochement between Turkey and Armenia, and where we work with the women, housewives, actually the women who are house employed, and so we wanted them to come together and to discover and figure out their commonalities in detail. So Agunik was one of the participants who took part in our program, despite some political and environmental concerns because of her administrative role in her village. She agreed to join us, and she all the way made it to the other side of the border to Turkey to meet her friends in cars, and where they came together and cooked for a Ramadan feast. So the story actually symbolically has to do with the social justice. Armine will be elaborating that dimension momentarily. However, the video tells about actually her motivation to join.
Որպես մարդ տպավորությունս բարձր է, շատ որոշեցի մասնակցել, քանի որ այն երկրամասից են եկել, այն տեղից են եկել, որտեղ ապրել են իմ նախնիներս։ Ուզեցի գտնել ընդհանուր բան այդ եղածի մեջ։ Թե այսօք ինչ ընդհանրություններ ունենք, եւ նաեւ նրա համար, որպեսզի ոչ թե թշնամակ լինի մեր մեջ այդ բարեկամությունը։ Կար շատ նախաբաշարումներ, այ օրինակ ընդհանրապես անմիջական շփում թուրք ազգությունների հետ կարողանամ արդյոք այդ փոխավ ես սկսեցի շփվել սովորական մարդիկ են մեզ նման հասարակ իսկ չի փոխվել ինչ չի փոխվել այն որ ես հələ պահանջատիրոջ կարգավիճակում եմ կուզեի ապրել կասում այնտեղ ես որտեղ իմ նախնիներս են ապրել եւ այն որ ես պիտի անպայման ներկամ կասում Muzey. Muzey kilisesi var. Ermeni kilise muzey. Çek. Bir de kurtarırız.
Kazanları bahçe. Nasıl kaldı? Ay amin ya sahi. Siz nasıl? Tamam çıkartıyorsun. Tamam. I'm very interested. Just how much and how many meters cigar und der Haushat?
Wow, so this is the two short video of the fermentation and her travel to Kars, the Turkish part of the city that we make the projects. But for us, the correlation or the relevancy of this particular woman's story with the fermentation and social justice is actually the two things. One is the mobility of the microbial cultures and the starters over the crossing the borders, and the other one is actually the kind of the longing. I will be telling you more.
Thank you. So what this story has to do with fermentation and social justice. So just to give you kind of a historic note here, Armenians after the genocide of 1915 are in like really big longing for their homeland, their lost homeland practically, which is currently Turkish Republic. And this is one particular thing that is very alive in the whole Armenian community worldwide. And the other thing is the seeking for justice. The denialist policies of Turkish Republic throughout the last century is creating this, really harsh feeling of justice seeking among the whole Armenian nation. And so we witnessed a conversation while Agunik was in Kars. We witnessed her interacting with the locals, with the cheesemakers, and asking asking for the techniques of cheese making and sharing her difficulties in finding really good yeast nowadays. And one of the local cheesemakers offered her to share some of the rennet, which is practicing and which is using very successfully. And Agunik was very happy to take a piece of this rennet from Kars, which is basically her ancestral homeland, and bring it back with her to her village where she lives currently. This kind of symbolic of this yeast traveling from one side of the border to another is symbolizing this longing for homeland and the seeking for justice. And on the other hand, it is also a very powerful symbol to our view as of building these relationships between these divided communities. Because this link has been interrupted and separating these two people who were coexisting together for centuries was interrupted for the last century. And now through this yeast which travels from one side of the border to the other and multiplies and involves more people and involves more communities, it's kind of a small way of reconciliation between these two. Yeah, and this is, here you see the particular type of cheese in which this rennet is used, which is called chana in the region.
So you might like to note that both sides of the border is very well known for its long esteemed cheese making tradition actually, which is in a way another matter of the interest of the social justice or the sociology scholars, which is the migration. The tradition is brought up to the region through the migrations. So this was the story we wanted to share with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So next we'll hear from Kristina, and there will be time for Q&A at the end, so keep your questions
Well, thank you guys so much. Good morning. My name is Kristina, and I wanted to take a moment to talk about fermentation, food allergies, and radical social justice. So I think one of the greatest things about fermentation, besides it making delicious things, is that it has the power to transform. So as fermentation as a metaphor is a really great tool, I think, so we can think about things. So for a moment, if we could just take a second and imagine a world where no one is hungry. We can do that, right? We can imagine that space. We can think through a place where everybody has access to the food that they want to eat, the tools to prepare it the way they want to prepare it, so it's culturally appropriate, and people can meet with others and eat together the way they'd like to. And right now, in the world, we have all the resources to make that happen. We produce enough food, enough nutrients, enough calories for everyone to be sustained. So the only thing that's preventing that from happening are the systems that have been put in place to stop that. So my idea of radical social food justice is breaking down those systems that prevent every single person from having access to the food that they want to eat. And I think one good example of how we can think about the systems that prevent that from happening is thinking about anybody who has food insecurity. So if you're hungry or don't have access to all the food you need, if you have a physical disability or a food allergy, any safety net system is almost impossible to access. A really good example of that is now there's a rise of food-specific or food allergy-specific food banks and food shelters. There's now peanut-free food banks, there's gluten-free food banks, and that really shows that the traditional systems of providing food and access to people who don't necessarily have all the means, it's broken, it's not working. There's some great work being done. I think Community Servings in JP is doing some amazing work for medically tailored meals for people with food allergies and medical conditions. It's a Meals on Wheels program. It's great, but the fact that they are tripling their space is indicative of how broken our food system is in the US. And part of the reason is that it's still based on commodities. So we take another second and think through a place where we live without hunger. Everybody has the food and resources they need. How do we get to a place where everyone feels welcome? One, we need to create those spaces. Part of it is creating places that everybody feels that they can access. So places that are physically accessible, like here, there are ramps, there aren't bikes on the ramps that often prohibit people from literally getting into a place. Gender neutral bathrooms are a great way of saying, hey, everyone is welcome here. Small things, labeling potluck items, mentioning allergens, taking some of the burden off of people who have to always ask by providing those resources. We think about this space here, imagining everything being in multiple languages, having an ASL interpreter, making the spaces that we need as inviting as possible. And I think more than anything is if we come from a position of power, and I will claim that right now. I'm having an audience where people are listening to me. English is my first language. I'm a US citizen. I have a lot of access that not everybody else does. If I'm sharing a dish or talking about food that's not of my cuisine, to make sure to do that intentionally, where I'm honoring the people that have made that, giving credit to those who've done that work, and not culturally appropriating anything that's not mine. So we take that to the next step and envision what else that would take to get to that place where everybody has the food that they want to eat. We have to think about how research is done. So a lot of research, and people who do work on nutrition go and research other people. One step forward would be thinking about doing co-research, where community members get to decide what that research looks like. They're co-writers, co-authors in that work. We could work to end the commodities program and let farmers farm what they want to farm, not what is subsidized by the government. We could demand that ingredient lists are labeled on everything. Right now, that's not the case. If you pick up a package, especially of medication, binders and other ingredients aren't listed. If somebody's not neurotypical or caring for a child or someone else, that's a life or death decision on whether or not that person may survive. And I think more than anything is we need to fix or end the need for food banks. If everybody has the access to resources to purchase the food they want, it's been shown study after study that people make the choices that are healthy and healthiest for themselves. So being able to end the need for food banks means giving people the tools and resources to make those choices themselves. So one example would be a universal basic income. There's also little things that we can do. We can share recipes. We can share and publish under Creative Commons licenses. So if someone reprints or repurposes something, there aren't copyright infringements. We can give money directly to people if you're in a position where that is an option. Funding people who are looking for or needing resources. We can center the work of people who are most marginalized. So folks that have the least access, share their stories. You can retweet them, you can repost them, do signal boosts. Also, always cite other people. If someone helps you co-create something or work on a recipe or an idea, make sure to cite them and give them information. I really like the idea of fermentation as this idea of thinking through how we can solve problems. I don't know, maybe today's the first day you learned about it, but the first day I figured out what sourdough was, that it was just flour and water, and that all the tools and resources were around us all the time. Like the yeast was there, we just needed that knowledge and that sharing from someone else to be able to create our first fermentation. I think that's a great metaphor for thinking through how we can work towards ending hunger in a socially just way. We have all the tools around us, we just need to start those communications and making those links and connections. Thanks so much.
Now we'll hear from Cheryl Paswater.
Hi, thanks for inviting me out. So I love kind of this like thread of sort of access coming up. So you know, when the festival asked me to sort of talk, I kind of decided I wanted to kind of focus on food deserts and what that sort of looks like, and especially I think in relation to fermentation. A little bit of backstory, just so you guys sort of, I'd rather stir the pot and have you guys kind of think about how do we go out there, which is, one half of my life I'm an artist. I work in nonprofit education in New York City, so I work in a lot of lower income neighborhoods. I also work as an artist in residence in adult oncology, so I experience a lot of different people with major illnesses coming through oncology on a regular basis. Some with a lot of access, others without a lot of access. So I've spent a lot of time thinking sort of about this subject, and then I have a fermentation company. Obscure double life, right? So how many of you in here are actually fermenting? Okay, take a look around the room. Just observe for a minute. What is the thread that we notice in this room? Don't be afraid to say it.
AC.
Huh?
AC.
AC? Oh, we are all experiencing air conditioning, yes. But very few of us are people, I think, of color. I think most of us are probably people who have significant means in our lives, and we've all had the exposure to fermentation. Something I've been sitting in a lot of panels and classes and things, and something I learned in the last year was actually that about 90% of people who live in lower income neighborhoods or food desert neighborhoods, meaning they don't necessarily have grocery stores or like readily access to fruits and vegetables. This could also pertain to rural regions of the United States. So this is not, but I'm just going to focus more on the city aspect. But about 90% of people who live in low-income food desert neighborhoods in New York City, which is like an insane number of people, a few million, about 90% of those people buy their food from bodegas. So if you, a bodega or like a corner deli, right? So when you go into a corner deli, what are the things that we are getting? Chips, soda, right? Maybe bread, maybe beans and rice. Maybe there might be a little bit of produce, some apples, or carrots. But I started really thinking about this in the sense of and because I teach so many workshops and realizing that there wasn't as much diversity in my workshops of people or populations of people as I would like to see. And so it's like, well, how do we bring, fermentation, and education, and access. It's like, I love that, more CSAs are becoming available, and, a lot of things that Kristina was touching on as far as how do we bring a great food and access to food into neighborhoods, but also how do we teach people what to do with that food? And fermentation for me is like this mind-blowing thing where I'm like, wow, you can take a cabbage, you can chop it up, you salt it, you ferment it, and you have this insanely nutritious, probiotic, magic food. But also we know when we ferment vegetables, we are tripling the mineral and nutritional content of that food. So to me, it's like I've had moments where I'm like, wow, we could solve world hunger just based on fermentation, like nutritionally, just by bringing in, and when you look at every culture in the world, people are fermenting, but it's like, yeah, we have this insane deficit in the US, you know, yet I go in to teach and I have kids who I know are not getting dinner that night. You know, so it's like, well, how do we take these skills and sort of like source them out to our neighborhoods? And how am I not the only, like the next white girl who's walking into your neighborhood and being like, okay, great, I'm another white person coming to teach people of color or people in their communities, like how to like use their stuff. I mean, I think it's a big conversation. You know, and for me, it's like, I can sit here and like lay, you know, facts and statistics and all this stuff on you guys. You know, but I think for me, you know, it's like when I think about it, it's like, well, how do we spur people on to like continue to spread education? How do we welcome in other communities? How do we, you know, sort of share and spread this gospel of fermented magic, right? Kind of sprinkle it, you know, all over the place so that people have the access. Am I making sense? Or is Foment? Yeah. You know, so I'm curious to hear from other people too. You know, it's like, again, I can sit here and rant for 8 minutes, but you know, what are ways that you guys see that we could bring, you know, fermentation in? How do we open it up and spread it, you know, versus it just being like, cool, I'm at another festival, which I love, and I want to know how I'm going to get a group of kids in the Rockaways who are just learning how to grow food and they know nothing about cooking and nothing about fermentation. How do I share that, right? Thoughts? Yes, please.
I've seen it with other things, educating, going to the public schools.
That's huge. I've been teaching at some schools over like the last couple of years, and it's been really amazing. I did a high school fermentation intensive. Granted, it was a school with a much higher financial budget, but you know, to see like, you know, 25 high schoolers choose fermentation and walk out and be like, yes, I'm gonna go make all this stuff, you know, and which is exactly, it's like handing it down, next generation. What were you gonna say, Alex?
I mean, if you're going to a community, you know, maybe you find someone from that community to co-teach with you, and maybe you find some culturally specific recipes that they can help you make out or something.
Yeah, I did a workshop for the Just Food Conference at Columbia University this year, and I had a really interesting experience where I was teaching sauerkraut, and they had done a focus around like resist the patriarchy this year, which was really cool, so definitely like a social justice element. And they invited a lot of kids and teens who are working in various programs in like the outskirts of New York City. And what was really exciting is like all of a sudden I had like all these kids in my class, like these teenagers, and they're all like, I have no idea what fermentation is, but I was excited to make something. And I was like, cool. They're like, you know, and this kid at the end, because I was talking to too many people, this girl leaves me like this Post-it note, and she's like, hey, my name is blah, blah, blah. I'm from this youth initiative in the Rockaways. And, you know, I'm super excited about this, and we've been learning to grow vegetables, but none of us know what to do with it, and I think this is something I can bring back to my community. Would you come to the Rockaways? You know, this is like a place where they're like, it's a bunch of kids with like zero budget, and I was like, because I believe the value in charging something for education, I said, can everybody afford $2? And they were all like, yes. So I was like, that's 2 bags of chips at the bodega, right? And, you know, bring a jar, give me $2, we're gonna ferment. And we got this pile of teenagers and just fermented the crap out of anything they brought in. And like, you know, just throwing down salt and, you know, just doing our thing. And it was like this magical experience where I'm like, yes, like how do we keep doing that? You know, like lighting these little fires, you know, in communities. Exciting. Yeah. How much time did I left? I don't know.
Thank you.
Oh,
yeah.
that's it? Okay.
So,
I was waiting for the sign.
No,
okay, cool.
you're right on. We'd love to open it up to Q&A if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask the panel.
You touched on briefly on CSAs, and from what I've seen, the concept, it's a great idea concept, but it seems to be sort of slowing down. Is that your, give me your insight into the CSA.
Well, I'm one of the organizers of a CSA in Brooklyn. It's pretty big. Our experience, and I actually live in a relatively diverse, lower income neighborhood. And it's been interesting, like trying to sort of expand like older people in our neighborhood, getting more people, to come into it. We have not seen our CSA slow down. What I have seen consistently with my CSA, and I've heard from other people, is people don't join CSAs because they don't know what to do with the food. And I think this is like a lot of what people don't know how to cook. A lot of people, like, they don't know how to scramble a fried egg. Like just really simple stuff. And I think some of that goes back, I think, to schools and education. Like if people were getting home ec and stuff, they would feel probably better about like using something like a CSA. Again, I live in New York. I haven't seen them slow down. I've seen them expanding to like more and more neighborhoods. But yeah, do you want to get back on that?
Yes. Locally, I don't know. The Daily Table opened about 2 years ago, and I think their model is they take soon-to-expire food and they get it either at a discount or free from other stores. And one of the things they did, I thought, they're in Dorchester, which was really smart, was work with the community and say, what do you want? One, they provided jobs within Dorchester, within the neighborhood. Two, people were asking, what do you guys want? And everybody responded back overwhelmingly and said, we would like prepared foods. This is the gap in our neighborhood in terms of, can you take those vegetables and do a stir-fry kit? Stuff that's already chopped up, take something off of our plate so that those vegetables are ready to use, we can bring them home. We know how to cook them. We don't need that information. It's that time management, that time saving. So I think more opportunities like that, where people are literally listening to their customers and co-creating solutions, is one way to bridge that gap between the CSA, the vegetables, and then making sure that people are consuming them.
Are they doing it?
They are. They've changed their model a little bit, so they do have more prepared things. They still have whole produce as well. Unlike a traditional grocery store, they're not going to have apples 365 days a year. There is more flex with what's available, but they've done more prepared kits.
And to piggyback on that, I actually just saw a thing the other day that there's some students at NYU who have developed an app, like a phone app, that is related to not food sourcing in general. So sometimes that might be, hey, this store has 24 extra bagels at the end of the day if you want to come get them. Or, and so you can source like different things, including CSAs, like restaurants and various locations to help people actually be able to pull up and be like, great, I want bread, or I need this, or and like being able to sort of access, and also to help with like food waste issues, which I think is sort of a really interesting concept.
Could I ask a silly question? What is CSA?
Community shared agriculture. So basically like a farm share, the idea that a group of people, we all pay up front to a farmer, and then you get like every week or bi-weekly, whatever it's set up, a shipment of like fresh fruits and veggies from like a local farm.
And could I ask, what is the name of the place in Dorchester?
Sure, it's called the Daily Table. It was co-founded by the gentleman who started Trader Joe's. It's the pilot model. They're hoping to open up, I believe, a second one in New York shortly. The idea is reducing food waste by making food more accessible in areas that already have a food desert. So this area was identified, and then a local community health center actually helped advocate for that space. So the community health center gave up some of their space to be able to add this facility. So they do some prepared foods and some fresh produce and meats. It functions just like a regular grocery store, but it just at a much steeper discounted rate.
They have two of them now.
Oh, they do? Oh, thank you.
Yeah. The other one's in Dudley. They opened up about 6 months ago.
Very cool. Okay, what would you think?
Just, I was thinking that like with kids and introducing fermented foods to them, my challenge is always like I'm trying to come up with things that they like, right? It's like most kids, when I say you want sauerkraut, they're like, yeah, I don't like it, right? But things like ketchup and mustards and pickles, and trying to open up my recipe book to more kid-friendly foods that they get excited about. So I'm really interested in like developing more selection that like 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds like.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty amazed. Like, I've been doing a lot of kid classes, and like I made sourdough pancakes with a group of kids like last week, and almost all of them were like, yes, I can get into this. You know, there were a few who were like, I don't like it. But I think some of it is also like, I kind of feel like, I don't know what I would say, I kind of feel like people, like parents are kind of being like pussies about their kids eating real food a lot. At least that's been my experience, where it's just like, I don't like it, I don't want to eat it. I'm like, dude, my parents make dinner, and it was like, eat it, or it's a spoon of peanut butter, and that's all you're getting. Like, you know, and that's it, you know. So I think it's like, I think umami is a strong flavor, and I think it's something where, you know, clearly it's like something that is acquired, you kind of build up a little bit over time, you know, it's like fermented ketchup or fermented this and that, but then also it's just like, I think it's so much convenience, you know? It's like school lunches, you get what you want, process this, like.
Well, they compare like pickles, like, or I'll say like, I make salad with bread, and I said, if somebody came in and said, well, it doesn't taste like Wonder Bread, and it's like, exactly. You don't want
Wonder Bread's crap, not real
or
food.
Bix dill pickles versus my pickles, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to taste the same, but educating them as well as why is this better?
Yeah. And I think it's like you have that conversation,
Right.
you know? It's like, you know, and I think also for kids, it's like bringing them into the process. And it's like, it's something like kids have to try foods like something like 60 times before they decide they actually like something or not. Like, you just have to keep trying it, you know? But, yeah. Go ahead.
I would add too, I know it's a little late once you put to 5 or 6, but getting them into it ASAP. So like my kids are eating pickles at 6 months.
Right.
And now they love it all because that's what their palate adjusted to. So like from the very beginning, babies don't have a lot of things that they don't like. In the very beginning, they're not smart enough to like form an opinion really. So once they kind of have that, whether it be sauerkraut or whatever it is from the very, very beginning, then they will like it forever.
Good question for Armine and Ihsan. I feel like in the U.S., a lot of our food traditions are gone like 1 or 2 generations away. Like, you know, my grandmother or my grandfather used to make sauerkraut or something, but my parents didn't. And I mean, I do, but that's a coincidence, right? What, I guess, what are your observations about the countries that you came from and the U.S. and how can we reconnect people with food traditions? I mean, one way is by having a fermentation festival, but how can we get young people excited about it, maybe, if you have any ideas?
Well, the recent work that we tried to make in the area is actually serving as in a way, more focused bridging two divided communities. But when it comes to get the attention of the younger generations, when it comes to valuing the traditional or the family recipes, I think it is relatively better now because the people are so much foodie and all the social media stuff. I think in a way encourage them to discover something authentic, something not common and not easily found here and there. I think the social media is a great power for that. But other than that, you know, it's very trend issue to know about the cuisine or the food in details, and it's like a way for some to show off at some point. So that's not maybe politically correct, but when it comes to keep them on track, it might help also, I believe. But do you have anything? But I think with regard to fermentation, I think the one issue that we better bear in mind is the ratio of fermentation, right? So it's like a cohabitation of each and every microbiotics, the same. I mean, it's like a coexistence practice, which we need more and more nowadays. I think sort of the social missions of the fermentation or any particular food practice or tendency has to be transmitted to to the younger generations, maybe starting from early ages, not 6 months old, but a little later. So to your point, I guess reaching out to refugees in this regard might be a very good starting point, because they have a lot of knowledge and wise they brought with them, but they don't have self-confidence to take it out, to reveal it, because fermentation is heterogeneous, not homogeneous, right? So we have to find a way to be together.
Excellent. So that's all we have time for today. But thank you guys so much for being here. And we've got speakers the rest of the day today, so please join us.